muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the third meeting today for the Virtual O2LAC Week 2020. Today we've had very interesting meetings about various topics. During the first one, we talked about talent for exporting services. We looked at Chile and Uruguay. Then we talked about ag tech and food tech with a panel organized by Startup Nation Central. During this session, then, we will summarize what the situation is like for Latin American fintechs during this crisis, and we will hear about the roadmap to follow in order to emerge stronger than before. For this session, we have Gabriela Andrade, the lead specialist for financial markets at the IDB. We have Esteban Velasco, co-founder and CEO of Simply.com, Daniela Espinosa, co-founder and COO of Kushki, and Maria Eliskovic, who works with O2LAC. I'd like to invite you all to participate in our chat. Please share with us your questions and comments and anything else you might have to say about this enriching session. So thank you to all our panelists for being here. Thank you. Gabriela, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Manuela. Good afternoon. It's a true honor for me to welcome you to this session, a new normal, new opportunities for fintechs. If there's anything that we've talked about during this entire event, we've said that the pandemic has sped up all digitalization projects, and finances have been no exception to this rule, quite the contrary. Digital finance solutions and solutions provided by fintech companies, such as those who are with us today, were instrumental during the pandemic, for example, for remote payments, for online purchases, and to avoid the spread of COVID. But it's very interesting that this acceleration in digitalization presents many opportunities, but also challenges to fintechs, and that is why it is a great privilege to have with us representatives from 3 fintech enterprises, which are truly living through this. They're responding to the crisis, but they're also a part of this interesting future that we will discuss. I think that instead of me trying to explain to you what these businesses do, I'm going to give the floor right to our panelists. I'll have you tell us in 2 minutes what your fintech does and explain in 1 sentence what COVID has meant for your business. We'll start with Maya from O2LAC. Go ahead, please. Thank you very much. Greetings to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. O2LAC is a personal finance app with a prepaid card. It's 100% free for users, and onboarding is 100% digital. We offer different financial services from card payments, personal loans, savings. It's all 100% done in the app. And what COVID and this crisis has meant to us is that there is growing demand and constant demand for all of our services. At the same time, it has forced us to adapt to the context and the economic realities of our customers right now. Great, thank you, Maya. Daniela, go ahead. Thank you very much for inviting me, Gabby. It's an honor to be here with everyone this afternoon. Kushki is a payment gateway. Now, what does that mean? What we aim to do is create a payment road network throughout Latin America. And the challenge we face right now is it's very difficult for a regional company to receive payments in different countries. So what we are trying to do is specifically standardize these pipelines and be the only road for payments for many companies in Latin America. Now, what has our main challenge been? I think that for us, really, COVID has been an opportunity. As Gabby said, it is a beginning. It sped up the digitalization process. We opened the business 5 years ago, and we always talked about this challenge about digitalization, and many companies weren't really considering this in their short and medium-term goals, and COVID changed everything. I think it's changed a lot of things around the world, and we need to adapt to them. For us, it's a great opportunity not only to help our business, but also we're looking at it from the perspective of providing employment, helping economies in different countries and in all of Latin America. And I think that this is something that we all need to think about right now. Great. Esteban. Hi, and thank you very much for the invitation. Simply is a platform of loans for SMEs. We do everything. We have a digital portal. It's 100% digital, and we've done this for micro and small businesses in Colombia. Now we can do this between in a period of 2 to 3 days when a customer asks for a loan. Uh, they might receive payment in their bank account in 3 to 5 days. We have loans from between $5,000 to $80,000. And when I'm talking about micro and small businesses, we're usually talking about businesses who are in a segment that is relatively underserved or sometimes not served at all by legacy banking services. So we make it quick, simple, digital, and smooth, and that allows us to add value. Now, when it comes to COVID, for us, for Simply, this meant that we had to transform, we had to adapt, and we needed to think that life goes on, but it's going on differently. And that is how we've faced the challenge with our products, and I'll talk about that a little later. Thank you, Esteban. Well, now that we have you, could you tell us about this transformation? Tell us about the products. Simply launched a support line for Colombian businesses. So what does it offer? What kind of support do you offer, and how have the companies received it? Obviously, their needs have multiplied due to the crisis. Sure, of course, without a doubt. So the measures we put into place as soon as all of this started was that first we listened to our clients to understand how their businesses would be affected. Simply is a very good barometer for what's going on in the economy, because in the end, 99.9% of businesses are micro and small businesses. So 4 out of 5, 80% of our portfolio needs to delay payments or make payments more flexible because their funds are currently limited. So we launched a product initially called Simply is With You. These were relief plans for these customers, grace periods, moratoria, etc. And in some cases, a lower rate when there was an interest rate, which normally doesn't happen because these loans are frozen. So this was over 1.5 or 2 months after the pandemic started. Then we conducted a study with about 320 businesses, and we understood what their specific needs were. And there was a response that was quite telling for us, which is that 57% of businesses surveyed were already beginning specific, concrete transformation plans. We're talking about early May, mid-May. And the reality is that transforming and adapting requires resources. So very quickly, we launched a line called Ongoing with different funders, and we were able to very quickly originate about $3 million worth in loans for these companies with this profile beyond what we already had in place for our current customers. And this was for current and new customers who were beginning this transformation. So these, in addition to economic resources, there's one additional thing. We are offering mentoring services for companies, specifically in corporate finance and business management. We're all digital, so we can do this all online through online courses that we provide. And for businesses in our region, in Medellin, we can do it for a 50% discount on the interest rate, and we're subsidized by a local agency in our area called Ruta N. They are subsidizing 50% of the program as long as interest is paid, which is also very important to us. And so all of this with no need for physical signatures, no need to go to an office. Of course, it's all digital. We do e-signatures, and this is done via digital contract. There's a promissory note. And so this process naturally means that there's no physical movement. And the understanding of the process, knowing your customers, is occurring in a space like this one, a video conference where we come to a much deeper understanding of our customer. Thank you, Esteban. I think that you show very clearly the advantages that fintechs have. Speed, for example, you were able to launch new products and disperse them, but during a pandemic, people didn't even need to go out. They were able to do it all virtually. So this is a great example of the advantages that fintechs have. So Daniela, if there's something that we've talked about during all this time, we've been talking about digital payments. Digital payments exploded out of necessity, and as you said, this has been good for businesses like yours. Tell us a little bit about what was different. How was growth different compared to what you had forecast? And it would be interesting, since Kushki operates in several markets in the region, it'd be interesting if you could tell us if the reaction was similar in the 5 different markets in which you work. Thank you very much. Yes, as I was saying earlier, COVID changed digitalization drastically. And to give you a few numbers as far as what happened to us, between December and April, we had 400% new affiliations of businesses wanting to sell online. And obviously we had an advantage in that once we were under lockdown, starting on March 16th, approximately, when we took the decision as the company, we had already implemented a home office strategy. So it was very important for us that from day one, we were operating at 100% capacity with all of our teams at Kushki. So I think that that's lesson number 1 for all companies. How can you be flexible as a company, have this capacity and adapt to new trends? When it came to customers, our data were similar, 350% increase, 400% increase in customers who wanted to work with us. So what did that mean for us? It was a huge challenge because obviously during month 1, it went down quite a bit. There was so much uncertainty. We had to conduct financial analysis. We had to work with our teams as is. We had to talk about the impact on our business, if it was positive, negative, and how to deal with this new uncertain scenario. There are many factors of uncertainty out there right now, and the capacity of a good business, a good fintech, a good entrepreneur right now, fintechs and entrepreneurs were really much more used to navigating choppier, more uncertain waters. So I think that's a challenge for all companies. We are still seeing quite a dramatic increase in the number of clients who want to work with us. We've made the strategic decision this month to hire and also expand our teams to go along with this growth. I think that this is very good news because you hear so much bad news out there all the time. So it makes us very happy. Just as O2LAC and Simply, who are constantly announcing that they're hiring, that in and of itself is a challenge, because hiring a team remotely and to set up this teamwork, having people feel like a part of the business and reward them for that is a challenge. I think it's a nice challenge because providing employment right now, given this economic crisis, is great, and we can all work together. So what we've talked about is creating a different ecosystem to see what opportunities are out there on the market so that we can work together. So we continue to grow. We are still taking on companies because for many people it's the only way to sell right now. They cannot sell physically in stores, and so we're trying to provide support in this fashion. How can we in some way keep the economy moving so that jobs are still out there and companies can still make sales? So that we find it incredibly satisfying. Daniela, so through markets, have you seen a difference in markets, or was this through overall? We found a lot of differences. My philosophy is that in some countries, e-commerce developed more quickly because there were startups, unicorns out there, such as in Argentina, there's a free market, and that varied the ecosystem, and it meant that it was very dynamic as far as entrepreneurship. Colombia right now with Rappi, Brazil has Nubank. So This is great for us when these very successful businesses start up because they change the system and more people dare to become entrepreneurs, to take on technology. So in markets like Mexico, Colombia, we've noticed much more development. Markets like Peru or Ecuador that were just developing e-commerce, like Chile, we had more of a client flow because everyone wanted to sell online, but many people didn't know how to do it. So each market has its own unique challenges. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Let's go to Maya because Daniela and Kushki work on the pipelines to make sure that companies can charge payments digitally, but Voila gives people a billfold, a wallet. So that's a different perspective, which is also very interesting. Now, Maya, the case of Voila has been reported on by international media outlets. They talk about 350,000 new accounts opened during the pandemic. So it's similar to Kushki. What was this growth like? How can you compare it to your previous forecasts? And how did you tackle this avalanche of demand? Thank you very much, Gabriela. Really, we're very grateful to Daniela and Kushki for their pipelines, their networks, because we wouldn't be here if it weren't for that. So I'll start with that. Voila has been on the market for under 3 years, and we started with a value proposition that was quite simple. The idea was to keep things simple, and I think that's a part of the reason that we've been successful, and that's why we have more business than we thought we would. We had thought we would have 2 million users in May. For non-Argentines in the room, that's 5% of all Argentina and 20% of all young people between the ages of 19 and 25. So we have 20% of young people using as their only wallet and only account, using Voila because it's the closest thing they have. It's the most similar thing to Netflix or Spotify, which is what they know in the area of banking. So this growth has been quite substantial. The Argentine people have received the company very well. What's different from what we had forecast over the last few months is that use grew more than we had expected. During an economic downturn, we're up by 60% when we know that the economic context does not really support that kind of consumption. Bill payment in our app tripled. General Argentines prefer going someplace where you can pay and you get a printed receipt and you're going to keep it so you can prove that you paid it, no questions asked. And things changed. Now people are more used to paying for things digitally. They can get a digital receipt. And so that's a mindset shift that had started happening, but the pandemic sped this up. So as Daniela said, we've seen this push for e-commerce, for going digital that we hadn't expected to see for many years. So this benefits everyone really because we know that these platforms, digital platforms, are more comfortable, they're cleaner, they're safer, and they're cleaner because no one wants to deal with cash right now. So to answer your question, we did see a lot of growth. We didn't expect for people to use our system so frequently. Currently, we have about 350 employees, and 35% of them have never been in the office. So it's such a young business, and 35% of people never set foot in the office. And so that's the culture we have. And so doing that, like Daniela said, making sure they feel a part of it, as Esteban said as well, is very important. And we need that now more than ever. Excellent. I have a question. This increase, was this seen in other age groups as well, or mostly in young people? We saw that, or did this lead to other people using it? Digital media used to appeal to technologically oriented young people, but now we're seeing that anyone, any age, people are more interested in digital systems. A bank in Argentina was advertising on the street saying, we'll take your retirement home to you, using a digital system. So that is evidence of something that never would have happened. But now more than ever, the at-risk population who needs to stay at home who shouldn't physically go to the bank. This option, it's changed the landscape out there as far as what our base is. Thank you very much, Maya. Now let's go back to Esteban. We all know that the effects of this crisis, due to the depth of the crisis, the effects are going to be felt for quite a while. They will be with us for a long time. And this is a complicated context for SMEs in our region. So Esteban, I'd like to ask you to reflect now, moving from being a fintech, providing capital and financing, to really becoming a part of the solution. You are on the front lines. You were there to help the economic recovery of your country. So what is your opinion on that subject, and what challenges do you need to overcome in order to continue to play this role? Because recovery is going to take a while. Yes, without a doubt. Well, I told you about the survey we conducted, and we asked our customers how much money they had, cash. And in Colombia, at least, the range was between 45 and 60 days, just to get an idea. Obviously, that time passed, and many companies, without a doubt, in this process of reinvention and transformation, were able to accommodate cash flows, or at least have a minimum structure in place. But what happens with companies that can't keep afloat? I think that we all need to think about where we're going in the market. And what we've tried to do is, over the last few months, we've thought about the journey, our customer's journey. So we identified several pain points, because it's not just the pain of financing, there's other pain as well, surrounding accounting, which is very traditionally felt, and it's very sad because in order to issue a loan, we need companies who have their books are up to date, their accounting is in order, and that's not always the case. So when we think about our customer journey, we have the capacity, we're developing it now, we're developing products and have the capacity, we're able to reach clients with new solutions. Now, in our case, we're not the great redeemer for these companies, but it's very valuable to work hand in hand with these companies, and we're really learning. When we started 3.5 years ago, we thought that all of our onboarding would be done through digital platforms, but interaction is digital, and so we need to understand very well what our customers' needs are via communication on a technology platform. That is very important. And when we identify what their pain points, not their value points are, what the pain points are surrounding payroll, for example, paying Social Security, paying taxes, with the tax agency. So when analyzing these pain points, we decided to create a horizontal and vertical chart. Horizontally, what we aimed to do was talk about very specific markets. Simply historically talked to business people. Now we're talking to different segments of society. So as I said in the beginning, with the ongoing line, we are talking to companies that are in the process of transforming. We talked about this a few months ago at a different event, but we have relaunched our line for women in Simply, for women entrepreneurs who have their own company, 51%. So we are providing free business management courses, and we are facilitating the creation of networks with this company base. We have a program for sustainable companies, another line for entrepreneurs who are under 35. So I'm talking about 4 different sectors beyond the fact that these are segments of business. We are also, that's a more horizontal level. So at the vertical level, what we're doing is launching new products. We'll be launching a new one this week, insurance for micro and small enterprises. These are needs. This is in our job description. For example, how do you obtain coverage for uh, contingency, which may be normal for insurance companies, theft or a fire, but also finding solutions such as data protection, which is now extremely important, digital transactions. So insurance, it's a financial product. And so the situation is taking us there. Now, not necessarily when it comes to our current customers, but we're launching a solution. We have several corporations that have knocked on our door wanting to have access to our platform so that using third parties' funds, not ours, we have our own resources, but with this model, with third parties, the idea is to originate to different segments that we currently do not serve. And in a month, and I don't want to spoil the news, but we will be launching a solution that is not necessarily different from what we currently offer, but Amaya and Daniela are here, and this could very well complement what you offer. Excellent, thank you very much. It's very interesting to hear how your customers' needs are changing your business model in a way, or changing the services that you have to offer. So I'd like to thank you for talking about women entrepreneurs. That's very important because it's such a risk. As we know, COVID has affected all small and medium-sized enterprises, and some more than others, but women entrepreneurs face more restrictions in general, and so we risk losing all the progress that had been made. So focusing on gender in fintech services is excellent, and it's an indication that we need to work in several key sectors. Daniela, let's go back to you. Could you, one assumes that this is going to be a new normal, this acceleration. So what do you think of this? Do you think that growth will continue to rise the way it has, or will it level off? And this fast growth, what does this mean? And a few of you mentioned this earlier. What does this mean as far as security goes? Esteban said that you need data security, but what we see and what we've heard is that this digitalization has brought more issues along, such as fraud. So all of these challenges in the context of more transactions, how does this look to you as far as what you will face in the future, or what companies like yours will face, Daniela? As far as growth, I think that none of us know what's going to happen there, and there are different forecasts for growth or the drop in the GDP in the region and in our countries. So I think that the crisis continues. It's obvious that there are companies that have been affected that aren't making sales, and I think the challenge we all face is that we need to help economic recovery, how from wherever we can do so. Everyone has a role to play, politicians, business people, workers, everyone can do their part to aid in recovery. For example, Esteban's work is excellent with SMEs when we look at what they need to do to go to a bank to receive approval for something that makes it difficult for them to grow. And they create a lot of employment, and it's important to have that kind of vision. Now, as far as risks, what do we see? At Kushki, we've been on the receiving end of cyber attacks, and we've implemented very robust technology. But what's coming? There's the economic crisis, unemployment, time at home, internet access. For us as a business in payments, it's a challenge because of the attacks on our technology that we might receive. We have received them. We have a committee that reviews them all. We haven't seen vulnerabilities on our platform. So what I always say is that we also need to make sure that these companies have the teams necessary. When it comes to payments, they need to have information security levels. The data that you put in the payments gateway needs to be properly taken care of.
And you have to have the right license, the level 1 for this, because there's more risk now. And we feel that security is one of our most important structural issues. Now I'm in charge of the risk area, and I'm coming from risk area in banking where I worked for years. And there's a lot of talk about fraud, and we're talking about this with Visa, MasterCard, local banking, American Express. What can we do so we can all help create a healthy ecosystem? Because if we don't take care of it, then it will be damaged, it will be ruined, and there will be new ways to steal and do fraud. So that's why we're working on it. We're holding webinars. We're trying to educate society because the response hasn't really been what it needs to be. And now that all this is growing, many companies don't even know the risk they're taking on. So part of our role now as a company isn't just to sell the product. We want to have a long-term relationship with the client. For many companies, we are consultants to them, and we need to advise them, as Esteban was saying, how can you have a secure sale? How are the logistics so it can get to the person that bought it? How can you avoid fraud? Everybody wants to sell online, but sometimes they don't have teams that are knowledgeable about this. They just tell people, now you will be selling online, but they're not prepared. So we are with economic analysts, with Visa, with MasterCard, we are holding some events even with the government, so we can all work together to create a healthy system that helps companies, final users, cards, banks, fintechs, just so the whole system is sound. But of course, risk exists, and this risk of fraud is something that is really a hot topic right now, and new risks are coming up as well, and we need to know how to address them. Thank you, Daniela. Very interesting thoughts for a good part of our audience, because a lot of the people who are listening to us are going through this digital transformation. So your recommendations are very relevant to them. And we have to really make sure that we cultivate a feeling of trust and confidence from our clients, because this can affect demand. And we haven't had still a situation of this kind in Latin America. And Maya, going back to O2LAC, and given the growth that we see in a typical country in the region where there were still challenges, financial challenges, and challenges in terms of digital finances, well, how do you see this change developing? Do you think it's here to stay? Is it permanent? And also, what measures can fintechs take to make this a permanent change so that more transactions will be conducted digitally and so we leave cash behind a bit? Maya. I do think it's a permanent change. And to explain my answer, I will compare Latin America to Europe. When you want to pay, in Europe, you can do contactless payment in public transportation. You can pay for candy or a TV set using the same card. And these payment methods that are not cash, there's so much penetration that people don't even think about it anymore. It's just not a condition. When the pandemic ends and you can come to Buenos Aires to visit, you'll see that you can't really get around without cash in Argentina. 70% of payments, according to the last figure we saw from the government, are done in cash. So for us who believe in this change, every time we have to pay for something in cash, we feel frustrated, because it's very easy to go from cash to a digital means of payment. It's very convenient. You can track your expenses, see what you spent it on. You can save your money. You can invest your money. That's important in Argentina with so much inflation. And this changes our monthly equation and our monthly balance. So if you look at O2LAC and compare it to a similar company in Europe, they have to compete with others established for a long time and say that their service is better. And perhaps they're selling to someone who already is receiving a good service, even if they may not even know the name of the bank. And I congratulate them on making that sale to potential users, because that's difficult. In Argentina, we're just going from cash to a digital medium. So that almost sells itself. So that's why I think that now that businesses are encouraging this and consumers are using it, they will not want to go back to cash. The experience, the user experience is just so much better. Now, what can fintechs do so that it does become permanent? I think we need to focus on providing a service that is excellent, that makes it very easy for people to solve any issues that might come up, or makes it easy for them to find answers. It needs to be extremely transparent and easy to use. The more closely we can make using these applications a similar experience to using cash, the more people will do it in terms of the ease of use. So if it's a super simple, transparent, easy to use, intuitive service to people, that is how we can make sure that this change remains. Excellent, thank you very much. Well, we don't have much time left, so let's talk about future trends just before we answer questions from the audience, and thank you very much for your interest. Going back to Esteban, do you think the long-term vision of credit fintechs has changed? And what would be the trends that go beyond credit fintech, since you're familiar with the industry and you know what's going on in your country? From your perspective, what are the most prominent trends? Well, as a fintech, I would say that the perspectives haven't changed, or just how long it will take for these changes to happen. What we thought was going to happen in 2 years is happening in 15 days, and this is actually good. Just we're making these time horizons shorter. Now, in terms of the industry, yes, there are changes, of course, that are happening. This situation is bringing complexity, but also opportunities. And I think the main opportunity here involves digital technology. We need to be obsessed with the digital technologies as entrepreneurs and businesses. And those of you who are listening to us, please just go for the digital tools for everything. For fintechs, this is very important, for all fintechs in general. And there is another very valuable element, and it's something very positive as well. And it's the fact that I think what is local, what is coming to us from our area, what is small, is really being appreciated and valued these days. And we can talk about processes where people want to buy everything on Amazon. That's true. But I think at the same time, there's a desire to buy the book from my neighborhood bookstore. And that neighborhood bookstore will have to create a digital platform in order to reach more people. And that's good for a business like ours, because of course we are providing service also to small retailers and small service companies. Their natural market is within their country or even just in their city. Not all companies are venture capital companies that are going to spread out all over the world and put a lot of little different flags on their website. The foundation of businesses in our country is made up of companies that serve a local audience. So that is productive and constructive. And I hope, perhaps this is wishful thinking, but I'm an optimist. I think most of the innovation needs to come from governments, and that innovation makes us ask ourselves in governments, how can we make sure there are smart contracts being used? How do we make sure the use of blockchain is massified in more notarial activities? Or what I mean is a signature, for example, a validated signature, or contracts and transactions. All of this can be made more transparent and efficient. And it's a reality, actually. Most financiers prefer a fintech than a traditional company if they're going to distribute funds. Thank you. And there's a behavioral change as well in terms of local businesses. And the problem is that many of those small stores are not digitalized. So we need to support them in that, and we need to say that we don't have a fintech representative from business finance management here. However, we want to remind the audience that it used to be the third segment, now it's the fourth segment, and here I'll talk about the new numbers for the ecosystem of fintechs in the region. But those fintechs are present in most of these, and they provide tools for digital invoicing, for an entire digital experience in finance. So if you're thinking about this, we invite you to look at what solutions exist with these type of tools in your countries and what you can think about incorporating. Now, Daniela and Esteban, I think already mentioned what I wanted to ask about. You described a future with certain opportunities and challenges, but what actions or what should the public sector do to support this change, and also the private sector? In order to connect two pipelines, you need to, for example, talk to private sector entities. So what do you think should be done from both of these perspectives? I'm a firm believer in collaboration, and I think one of the main lessons I've learned in Kushkin, or in this change of going from being a banker to being an entrepreneur, is the importance of collaboration. When you go to fintech events, the first thing everyone's looking for is collaboration. Maya, what can we do with Voila? What can I do? What do you do that I don't do? How can we work together? And I think very good things, very positive things come out of these two worlds. So we need to learn to work in a more collaborative way, not just within a company, but with other companies as well. What is too expensive or too difficult for me to do, how can I have an exchange with someone else who does do it? And now, starting with COVID, one of my roles has been bringing the public sector closer to the private sector. And in Ecuador, we have served a very strategic role. I've attended meetings with 3 ministers and the vice president of the Chamber of Technology and Innovation in Ecuador. And our goal is how we generate interest in the government in digitalization. And I actually have a study published by the IDB. Maya was saying 81% of digital transactions, or rather public transactions, take place digitally in the European Union, but only 7% of these digital transactions, or of these transactions, are digital in Latin America. So it's a huge opportunity for cost reductions for governments, for a better perception of service to customers, for less traffic, for many things. And from our perspective, there's been a lot of acceptance of this from the government, and it's increasing. And our role is to create what is new. And as initiators, as trendsetters, we have the difficult part of convincing the public sector, of talking them into it, and to get the banks to be their partners. I think, and this changes in time. I think in the beginning there was a lot of resistance. People thought fintech was going to replace banking, but I see fintech more as an octopus, just an extension so you can reach where you couldn't reach before. So I always say this to the banks. I say, how can we work together? How can I help you? And how can I help you digitalize your own processes? We have digitalized banking processes, the reimbursement process. We can digitalize it and make it faster. So I think this collaboration within the financial system needs to increase. We need to say, these are companies that are here to stay. They've generated a lot of value in a short period of time. We 3 participants here are more or less the same age in terms of the age of our companies, and our valuations are high. The impact we've had is large, and we have that ability as fintechs to react quickly, and that is the speed that the banking sector needs to adopt. So I think collaboration among companies with the government, continuing to work with the government, with the regulatory agencies, avoiding excessive regulation that kills innovation. And the last thing we need right now is to kill innovation. So we need to ask for the government support in this. And then multilateral entities need to participate and support, all within an ecosystem. How can we get the whole ecosystem to work well together so we can all grow? Perhaps certain segments were growing more before. Well, now fintech will grow. Maybe agriculture was growing. It continues to grow, but maybe it's the fintech's time. Let's support them. That's where we're developing employment. So it's not that we attack each other, it's how can we help each other so we all grow. And I always say, if you did not digitalize as a bank, then a foreign bank or some other bank will come in with digital abilities and compete with you. So if you didn't do it, someone else will come in to do it. There are no borders for technology, and from the outside, you can do many things that aren't done locally. And another important concept is that digitalization reduces poverty. I read a lot about Estonia as a case study, how they digitalized almost the entire country, or the Minister of Technology of India, who was saying that one of the easiest ways to help reduce poverty is by digitalization. When you can pay a development bonus to someone, sometimes 20% of it disappears as commissions or as transaction expenses if you have to go pick it up. So how do we help these groups that are more vulnerable? I think digitalization can help us reduce poverty. Thank you. Very interesting thoughts. And I like that idea that the financial sector as a whole will grow together because the needs are there. Doesn't matter what type of financial service you provide or what group or what segment you target, the challenge of financial inclusion for the region is still there, and we need everyone to act in order to address it. Thank you, Daniela. Do you have anything to add regarding measures in the public or private sector to facilitate growth? And do you think there's anything that could represent a risk, a threat to this future that we are talking about, Maya? Just to add to what the previous two panelists have said, I want to talk about a topic that's not talked about a lot, and it's because people who talk about this are usually already financially educated, but the idea of being able to explain these concepts to users, coming up with the government with a plan for inclusion, including the private and public sectors working jointly. I think this can only be positive. We depend on both sectors to make sure that clients will have confidence in the platforms and will understand the value that they're offering. It's happened to us that people don't understand the service that is being provided, and that is our responsibility as well as the government to say and help people understand that fintechs are okay. It's not the same as cryptocurrency or somebody who's just trying to loan you money online. And this needs to become part of the general culture of the country, that it's okay and that we can grow in this direction. And then I also wanted to talk a bit about interoperability. We can't collaborate with banks unless we are using the same standards. So in Argentina, what was done is for every account, whether it's a bank account or a virtual account, there's a number that you can use for immediate transfers. And this is a unique thing in the world. And what we've achieved with that as a fintech is the fact that many people can feel that they're part of the banking system because they can receive money from another account. So there are very important aspects that are structural. And I think the ease with which we can do business and collaborate will only increase. And the risk is in not doing it. Excellent. Thank you, Maya. there are many questions, and before we go on to the questions, I want to talk about collaboration for a moment. Collaboration among fintechs will also be very important. How do you see, very briefly, so we have time for questions, but how do you see collaboration, especially when it comes to what we all know is coming but haven't mentioned, these big techs, the big companies in financial services? How do you see collaboration in this future with big techs, or are they just another player? What are your thoughts about this? Just 1 minute per person, Esteban, just to continue in the same order. Well, collaboration should be a business principle. And of course, as technology companies, we're still businesses. So it's simply we work with 35 different suppliers today, providers, some bigger, some smaller, and we're designing a program to help with technological startups more closely. At some point within our process, we will need them, not necessarily at the front end, because there's sensitivity around the client for this, but in the back end, it's important, of course, to work with them. Daniela? Yes, as I was saying earlier, collaboration for me was something I learned and will stay with me. It's very difficult to try to stop technology. So what is being created as members of this planet, we just have to adjust to it. Some other company, if we don't do it, someone else will learn how to use this technology. So the idea is, how do we adapt and support this change? Now, if you notice, this is a very vulnerable world these days. Everything is change and uncertainty, and changes that would take place within 5 years before now happen much faster. And as businesses, we need to have that speed and agility. Fintechs had it. Now traditional companies will need to learn to operate in these scenarios as well. Great, Maya. I think, speaking from my perspective from O2LAC, something we've learned is that we need to bring into our platform people who have never been part of banking before, never had digital records before. And for this, there's the idea, know your customer. Every user that comes into the platform, that is field work. And if we listen to or look at news about WhatsApp or Facebook, and they're moving to payments, asking for all the documents that regulations require in each country, it's very local work. So I think collaboration will be inevitable. We're trying to build up this space, and there will be ways to integrate the platform so it's better for the user as well. Thank you. Going on to some questions from our audience. Here's an interesting one that I would like to hear the perspective of all three of you on. When we look at venture capital markets in the region, fintechs get the lion's share of this. And many of the companies that are listening to us, young companies, are wondering, what advice can you give them so they can start this journey towards this type of financing? And I know all three of your companies have received capital from different types of investors. So I'm sure you all have something interesting to say. Let's start with Maya, who, at least I've seen some news about big investments going into O2LAC. What can you tell us? Well, O2LAC got $10 million in an initial round from US investors, then 34 million with Goldman Sachs, with a very important fintech investor. And then the last round was SoftBank, also with a large amount. And we've learned a lot along the way. So I think three things we want to highlight is, we need to be very clear about what our objective is in raising capital. We shouldn't just do it because we need it for day-to-day operations. You need to have a vision. I want this capital because I want to do A, B, and C changes in the company. I want to grow in this direction, and I want to go after this or that target market. And investment, sometimes people think, well, I get the money and that's the end of the relationship. You also need to choose your investors just like they choose you, because it's a connection where there will be a lot of back and forth. So you need to think, who is your ideal partner, who is aligned with the vision of your business. We spent hours talking to potential investors so they could understand where we wanted to take this company, so they would go along with us on this journey. And then lastly, get started early. It's much easier to talk to an investor when you're not looking for capital yet. So you're asking for their opinion, the vision of the industry before you're actually knocking on their door to ask for money. This, we've seen, yields much better results than if you just talk to them only when you need the cash. Excellent, thank you. Anything else, Daniela and Esteban? Yes. I always say that we all have good ideas. The challenge is in the execution. There can be many companies with good ideas, but I think what makes a fintech successful is the capacity to execute these ideas, to make them a reality. And surrounding yourself with good people, hiring good people is essential. Using that money to hire people who will add value and make the difference. And as Maya was saying, we need wise money, not just get funds because you get funds. When we open in Mexico, we need a Mexican fund to teach us the ropes, to show us the ecosystem, to open doors for us. This money, what it does is help with your business plan or bring you into contact with potential collaborators or clients. So it's not just the money, it's a plan, it's the ability to execute it, it's the ability to get results. But like any investor, they will be measuring your results and they're strict. Is this your plan? Are you executing it? So that's important. Smart money, a team that makes a difference, and being very clear about your strategy and where you want to go. Thank you, Esteban. Anything that hasn't been said before? One last idea. Not all companies can be unicorns, and not all funds are seeking unicorns necessarily. So we need to think about it very carefully. You can look on Google, zebra companies with a purpose, or rabbits with real actual businesses using interesting tech. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. We could sit here and talk for hours, but unfortunately we've run out of time. I think the take-home message is we've seen clear examples of how fintechs are truly helping to improve lives. As we always say at the IDB, they've been doing it during this pandemic. They will continue to do it in the future. And that's why the IDB group looks forward to continuing to work with this ecosystem and with all of you. Thank you, all of you, for being with us. Thank you for your questions. We're sorry we could not answer all of them. And now I give the floor to Manuela. Thank you very much. Thank you to all our panelists for sharing their thoughts with us today. You gave us some great insights, and not just for the private sector, but for the public sector as well. So thank you very much, and I invite all of you to continue this conversation at the link of this session on the O2LAC platform. And before we disconnect, I wanted to invite you to the next session. I'll tell you a little bit about that. Netflix, Salesforce, and others have learned that subscription services are a field that is growing. So we will have a session with Tien Zuo, founder and CEO of Zuora and creator of the subscription economy concept. So we'll talk about the potential of this business model and what this vision represents for an industry that grew over 300% in the last 7 years. And we have the link here. If you cannot find the link for any reason, please remember all the meeting links are in the agenda, and there you can also find the recorded videos of these meetings in case you were not able to attend. We have now half an hour before the start of our next session. Thank you for moderating this session, Gabriela, and we hope to see you all again very soon. Bye. Thank you, everyone. It was a